Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And today I'm going to be showing and talking about one of my other favorite characters from the 30s and 40s. I've already mentioned briefly in passing on my channel before about the Shadow and Doc Savage, that I've done videos talking about them, but now I wanted to talk about another one that is also really special to me. I recently started rereading a bunch of his run and collecting some of the comics from a different publisher. Today I will be talking about and discussing the Green Hornet. He never had a pulp, while characters like the Shadow and Doc Savage did, but he did have his radio show, and of course the 40s serials, and let's not forget the excellent television series that starred Van Williams and Bruce Lee, and not to mention the very divisive movie with the actor whose name we shall not mention. But going back to the comics, as first and foremost here, I got a bunch of these in today from eBay. The two loose issues here at the top I picked up from my local half-price books for $2 a piece. I found a couple more that I have on hold there as well, so those will also be joining my collection. And the rest of these here that are bagged and boarded, I got from the eBay seller, Cyberspace Comics. I'd highly recommend checking that person out, or that individual out. And be sure to tell him in the feedback, if you do decide to buy comics, that your favorite ghost sent him your way. But anyway, that being said, let's get started, shall we? The top half is a bunch of the 80s and 90s Now Comics run. The bottom half here is just a little bit of the Dynamite books. But starting at the top here, we have the 3-issue mini-series, Green Hornet Solitary Sentinel. This is part 1, part 3, and bagged and boarded from him, part 2. This is a Paul Reed story. So if you've read his run, you'll kind of get an understanding of his character and the latter half of the first series. If you've basically been reading The Green Hornet from up till this point, it references a lot of events from the previous runs. They talk about the previous the previous Green Hornet, the 60s incarnation, how he had a heart attack, so he had to retire and stop being the Green Hornet. They reference Paul's brother Alan, I believe. I have to reread issue 2. I've already read issue 1, so I have to go back and read that one, and then, of course, pick up issue 3. This run is the first to introduce the Black Hornet, a concept that is later used in Kevin Smith's Green Hornet series. I found that to be really interesting. I will be doing this series I will be giving this series its own dedicated video where I go more in-depth about it, but just putting that to the side, that's Green Hornet Solitary Sentinel. Moving at the top here, I have the first 2 issues of Paul's full run on the Green Hornet. I believe, looking at mycomicshop.com and reading the issues there they had for sale, this ran for like almost 40 issues, which was really interesting. So now, after I'm done with these 2, I'll have to track the rest of those back down. We see a return of Mishi, M-I-S-H-I, Kato, Hayashi. I am probably butchering his name, but he was the second Kato. He worked with the 60s Hornet, worked with Paul's brother, and Paul himself. So this Kato has been around for a while. We see the return of his sister, who goes by her own identity, the Crimson Wasp, because she left Paul's side around issue 8 or 9, I believe, from the first run. She basically said goodbye, and then her brother came and picked up the Mantle of Cato again after that. Again, I'll be giving a bunch of these books their own more dedicated videos as well. This is more just an overview for right now. But she comes back, and we kind of understand her journey a little bit around issue 11, 12, and 13. It's called The Saga of the Crimson Wasp, I believe, if I remember correctly. But that's this run. It's a very lengthy run, has many... there's a lot of different stories. Again, I'll be reading this book series again, and then giving it its own dedicated video, as well as picking up the rest of it in due time. But that's the look at these two. This one is the first run on Green Hornet. This series was written by Ron Fortier and art done by Jeff Butler with a very beautiful Jim Steranko cover, which I have as an art print hanging on my wall in my room. And then a tribute cover from this one is the... First off, I'll say this one is supposed to be the 40s incarnation. This is a combination of the radio show era Hornet and the serial version of the character. But what's weird is the radio show, the characters are named after the 60s incarnations, which is Lenore Case and Mike Axford. In this one, they are given different names. The 40s Brit Reed, his secretary's name is Ruth Hopkins. And I forget the name of his Axford character. I think his name's like Mike Sullivan or something Sullivan. I'll have to go back and check that to make sure. And again, I love the covers. The story is excellent. This ran for 14 issues. Starts in the 40s, starts in the 60s. 60s Hornet Britt Reed ends up retiring later as a result of a heart attack. And then Alan Reed takes over. I won't tell you what happens to him. Needless to say, it is quite tragic, though. It causes his Cato to retire for a while because he's overwhelmed. Basically, it's survivor's guilt, if I probably just spoiled it there. Paul ends up taking over later, and then along with his sister as Cato, and then it's basically like after a while she quits. Although I always felt like with the way she ended it, his sister actually gives Paul a kiss and essentially tells him goodbye. She kisses him. So it's like over time there could be maybe seen as some romantic tension between them. I don't know if that's explored in the second run on the Hornet at all when he sees her again. I couldn't tell you, but I'm getting a little sidetracked here. I'm just kind of giving an overview of the series as from what I remember. And anyway, he and Paul, his Cato, they basically finish off the rest of the series and start their own run with this one. But yeah, that's the first series, and I'll be giving its own dedicated video in full. I probably might break it down issue by issue, or I'll probably talk about the whole thing entirely. The next one here is another one written by Ron Fortier. This is another adventure in the 40s with the 40s Green Hornet. This is a miniseries called Sting of the Green Hornet, with art done by Ron Fortier, and interior art and cover art done by Jeff Butler. Issue 1, 2, and 4 all have posters in them. Issue 4's, though, is actually in the book itself, so if you'd want the poster, you'd actually have to rip apart the book just to get to it. And for that, I am not willing to break it, and for that, I'm not willing to ruin the book. So I might end up getting a second copy later to try and see if I could get the poster. This one, the poster is not included. This was loose. But these two, issues 1 and 2, are still sealed. So the poster is in the back. In fact, I will show you real quick with issue 1. Okay, I just opened issues 1 and 2 here, and they are still in their bags. And as you can see, the posters are still sealed inside here. They are loose. They're not like included in the book. They're loose from them. I found one copy that had of issue 3 that is still sealed with the poster, and it's a lot like these two. The poster just hanging out in the back, as it were, and sadly with issue 4, its poster is stapled into the book, so if you'd want that poster, you'd have to basically tear up the book to do so, and I really don't want to do that, so I'll have to find a secondary copy. But I've always loved Fortier's writing and his teaming up with Butler to write a Green Hornet story, so that was something that appealed to me, and I've always liked the 40s incarnation of the Hornet, so that's why I jumped on reading this series. I read this once a long time ago, but it's been a few years, so I'll have to crack these back open again and give them another read. There are homages to Superman. There's a person that is supposed to be Clark Kent, a reference to him, and I believe it's supposed to be issue 3, and this was reading an older copy a while back, or at least seeing some photos online, because the person here on the front cover here is supposed to be an homage to Superman. But that's going from there. Also, I will say, in the issue 1 of the Green Hornet, the first one, there is an homage to the Lone Ranger, because Ron Fortier, they did an interview with him recently on the Green Hornet Case Files podcast. When he was talking to them, they basically described it as a generational family story, and they wanted to make the connection with them and tie that all together. If you want to hear him talk more about that, I would highly recommend giving that a listen. I will be including the podcast with that interview in the description of this video when I get done. So that is my little overview there of the Sting of the Green Hornet. Like I said, rest assured with these others, I will be giving these their own dedicated video. Putting all that back together down here at the bottom. This is another mini-series. This was a third of 3 books that share this title. This is from the third batch. This is the Tales of the Green Hornet. The cover here is supposed to be of Paul and the second Kato, but the story inside is essentially an origin story of the Green Hornet. It starts as the 1940s Brett Reed, and talks about how he and Kato met, and how they basically came together to make the idea of the Hornet. We see the creation of the Black Beauty, and basically him having his gun and costume. This is a really good series. This was one that Fortier did not write, but it is still really well done, and it's a really fun read. There's 2 other issues. At the end of issue 2 is a breakdown of what issue 3 was. It was a preview. It was set in the 60s and talks about an adventure with that Green Hornet. And issue 4 was the same way. So this is also a good read as well. There is also another reference to the Lone Ranger as well in this one. Some of the writers, because of licensing, I don't think they could talk about the Lone Ranger at some points, but other books they could. This next one here is a 3-part mini-series. This is a more cyberpunk style Green Hornet, if you guys like that sort of book. This takes place, from reading the captions in issue 1, this takes place around during the 2040s, so it's far in the future, and this Green Hornet has essentially toppled the criminal empire and has set himself up to the top. So he has more played into the villain aspect and has essentially lost what it means to be a hero. The man in the black suit that we see him fighting is actually supposed to be his Kato, and through some holographic 3D technology, that's how we see the mask here on his face. It's like a digital hologram, and through some contact lenses, he actually meets his father, who has a cyberpunk Sandman type gas mask, but yet as far as the costume, as far as a green bodysuit, looks actually a lot like the 1940s Green Hornet. And that's more to it kind of looks like the 40s Green Hornet a little bit, except with like a cyberpunk Sandman type gas mask. It was interesting to read through it. I've recently read issue 1. Still need to read through issues 2 and 3. Look forward to reading those. It looks like, I'm assuming here by the fact that instead of this, Kato is actually fighting against the criminals. Means I guess they must have got things straightened out from issue 2. And they're working together now. So we'll have to see that. But if you like cyberpunk, this is definitely the book to read. And Jeff Butler is the cover artist on here. You can see his name here on the, if my camera picks it up, his name is written on the bottom of the cover here, and in blue next to the, it's in blue here next to the criminal he knocked out. And then that's all of the Now Comics group run on the Green Hornet, or at least all of the ones that I have. Now looking at the ones here on the bottom, this is all from the Dynamite run on Green Hornet. I have the first 4 issues of Kevin Smith's series. Come on, camera. It's not focusing now. This is the first 4 issues of the Kevin Smith series. These are the Alex Ross covers. Issue 1, 2, 3, and 4. I actually used to have a trade of the first several issues, but sadly, when I moved to the house I'm at now, a bunch of our boxes, because of the trip down here, they weren't secured down. They fell out of the back of one of our moving vehicles. They broke, and some of them broke open, and some of the contents were either scattered or destroyed because some of them got ran over. So a bunch of those were some of my comics and some of my parents' belongings. So we all kind of lost some stuff there. So I had to retrack a bunch of this stuff down that I've read before. This stars Britt Reed Jr., the son of the 60s Hornet, and Mulan Kato, which is the daughter of the 60s Kato. So in this one, it's a literal passing of father to son instead of uncle to nephew like the Now comics were. I haven't read anything past, I want to say, issue 10, because after that there was a new writer, and I haven't read to see what direction he took the Hornet. But I want to. Curious to see what happens. And then I have 2 parts of the 4-issue miniseries prequel that took place before Kevin Smith's Green Hornet. This is Green Hornet Blood Ties. I've seen a couple other YouTubers talk about it, and basically, like, the consensus from what I understand is this series really wasn't that good. It focuses more on a mob story than a Green Hornet story, and that he's not in it much. And from what I've seen from these first 2 issues, they're not really wrong. The masks here on these characters for designs, they look really weird. They're weird. They have weird design in the book. But also, in the end, it's a prequel. A couple of the mobsters that play a part in the Kevin Smith book, you do see them when they were younger. I need to read issues 3 and 4, because I just kind of skimmed through these. I mean, I still like it, and I still definitely want to pick it up, but I can see why people have their issues with the series. So that's kind of the Blood Ties book there. This is a Dynamite 1940s Green Hornet. This is done by Mark Waid. I really like the artwork to this book. I'll just show you a page from the inside. Put that off to the side here. Some of the interior artwork. there's a reference to the Lone Ranger in this one. He said, I had inspiration. My great uncle was a daring and resourceful masked rider in the Old West. It's a foreshadow of the Lone Ranger here. I had money my father had left me his fortune. I've used to build a lair, an arsenal, and best of all, a rolling tank disguised as a black limousine. This is the Green Hornet. Really like the interior artwork on this. I like their design of the Black Beauty. But what's funny is, what I find a issue is, it's just really weird. The fact that this version of Kato, with his mask, he looks more like his 60s design than how he did with the 40s design in Fortier and Butler's issue 1. He had a little bit of a different style costume, and he had a pair of goggles, and not the domino mask that Bruce Lee wore in the 60s TV show. So Kato's design aside, this is a interesting read. I skimmed through this earlier before making this video, and I really liked it, and I will be definitely picking up the rest of it. And lastly, this was a reprint of some of the original Green Hornet comics from back then. Green Hornet Golden Age Remastered. This basically is a reprint, and I'll just show you quickly the inside of this one. They're really short pieces of stories. Just here's the interior, done by Fran Stryker. Stories in this comic were published in the 1940s Green Hornet Comics #1. This version of the Secretary is Lenore Case. The Hornet Mask and Gas Gun. The Hornet Mask in this one is just a face mask to put over his mouth. Just doing a real flip through here. I thought it was kind of interesting, but I haven't really read this book in depth yet. Just giving you a flip through of it. That's kind of the end of it. So I hope you guys like this little overview here. I ran a little bit long because I wanted to give my thoughts on each of the books and some of the series here. A little bit of an overview and an explanation. But like I said, some of these I'll be going more in depth on when I read more of the books or reread them for videos. But until then, do all those normal YouTube things. Like, comment, and subscribe. And be sure to click that bell notification to stay up to date on when I release more videos. So until then, I will see you guys next time with another video. So take care. Have a good rest of your morning, afternoon, and evening. And peace.